Hey, John Dillon here with another tutorial from visualbroccoli.com. In this lesson, we're going to show you how to create your own Photoshop background for PowerPoint. So, case in point, if you look at the slide here, we're going to go ahead and make a title slide, which I like to do, have a distinct title slide, which I may use multiple times throughout a presentation or just once, as well as our standard insert slide. And that's what we're going to do. And basically, we're going to do this and kind of create with our mythical company here, Pre-Hospital Training Institute, which I made up this logo for this tutorial alone. And by the way, STEMI is for you non-medical people who happens to do with ST elevation, myocardial infarction. Of course, the principles we're going to talk about here kind of show more of a medical background, but of course, you can use anything besides the EKG to still get the look that we're showing here. So, and you can see the nice clean look. And there's a reason why I actually put this logo over here, and I'll talk about that a little later on. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to go into Photoshop, and I'm going to show you how I built this. But before we do that, we need to go into PowerPoint and get our size. So what I mean by sizing is this. When we go into Photoshop, we're going to actually make this complete background, and we need to know the size of this background. Well, sure, we can go up here and figure it out, but you know what? That's too much work, and I can never remember numbers, so we're going to do a cheat. So we're going to go to Insert, and we're going to go to a Shape. And what I'm going to do is come up here and just, with that rectangular tool, come up here and just basically draw a square that's going to cover my complete slide. Now I'm just going to right-click on it, and we'll just cut it, and let's go into Photoshop. All right, so we're going to go File, New, and we're going to copy the image from Clipboard. So not only will it give me the proper size, it'll actually give me something to work with. So here's our background layer, and I'm going to name these so you can follow along with me as I reference them, because we're going to have like 7 or 8 layers in here when we're all done with it. Now, let's go ahead and define the color for this layer. And the way I'm going to do that is I can just click in here and grab a blue someplace. But I want to give you a specific blue, and I also want to introduce you to the RGBs, because we're gonna, a little later on in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can actually pull a color. So we're going to pull a color from our logo and use that color to assign it to some of our text. And the RGB color is what you can use in PowerPoint to assign these colors. But the colors I want you to put in here, the numbers, to get us this blue that I'm using is 8, 50, and 188, and that's the blue I want. And I'm going to go ahead and fill this with blue. That's looking good. Let's add another layer, and we're going to call this our vignette. And this one I'm going to actually fill with black. So I'm going to bring black to the foreground, grab the paint bucket tool, fill it. Now we're going to grab the elliptical marquee tool, and I'm just going to get it fairly wide there. And I may have to use the arrow keys to kind of position where I want. And I'm going to hit the delete key. And get rid of those marching ants. Now, I'm going to add one of my favorite, or I shouldn't say favorite, but it's one I use very frequently, the Gaussian blur filter. And we want to go over, like, let's say, a radius of 75 pixels. And just do OK. And I'm going to drop the opacity quite a bit on this, because I just want a little dimension here in the color. I certainly could have tried to fool around with the radio gradient tool, but I found this just as easy to do, so that's why I do that. All right, let's add another layer. This one is going to be our grid. And this is kind of nice. I use the grid for a lot of things, not just for medical stuff, but I use this a lot because it just adds a nice little dimension and nice little style that you can't create in PowerPoint. Okay, to create our grid, we need to actually create a new document here. So we're going to go New, Blank File, and I'm going to resize this one to 40 by 40. I'm going to do OK. And I want to go ahead and fill this layer 1 with white. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the default colors here and bring white to the foreground. And I'm going to go ahead and grab the paint bucket tool, fill this with white, and I'm going to create a new layer. Now this one, what we're going to need to do is need to select layer 1. So I want you to go ahead and layer 1, hold down the Command key on the Mac or Control key on the PC and select the thumbnail, and we get our marching ants. That's the quickest way to select the area. Now I'm going to select layer 2, and I'm going to come up here to edit, and we're going to go ahead and stroke outline. So it's going to outline what has been selected. And I want the width to be 1 pixel, the color to be black, and let's make sure inside is selected. If you do it outside, you're not going to see your image. All right, and I want to make sure, and this is a very important one, turn off the white background. We get rid of those marching ants, and you really can't really see it. You can kind of see it around the edge, but it's kind of hard to see, but it's there. Now we're going to go edit, and now we're going to actually define pattern. So we're going to take this image and use it as a pattern. So I'm going to name this 40 by 40. And we'll just go pixels. And we're done. We can actually get rid of this. We're now going to go ahead and create our pattern. So we're going to go to Edit, and we're going to go Fill Layer. And if this is the first time we've ever used this, it's probably going to be set to foreground color for you. We want to come down here and select Pattern. And down here, we want to choose that 40 by 40 pixel. And you can have a variety of different sizes in here, which I typically do on my computer. So I'm going to just select that, do OK, and it's brought in the grid. The next thing I want to do is inverse the color. I want these, instead of being black, I want it to be white. So I'm going to go ahead and go up to Filter, Adjustments, and I'm going to go ahead and invert. And you can see there's a shortcut hotkey right there, Control plus I for the PC or Command plus I on the Mac. And that softened it up. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just drop the opacity quite a bit here to probably around 8 or 9%. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a little Gaussian blur to it just to soften it a little bit more. And I'm probably going to go around 3.1 on that. Again, just don't want it to be so harsh. I want it to be kind of soft. I don't want to have any competition with any images that I have on there. So this is really just a background, and it's kind of like a watermark. So that looks good. Now the next step I want to do is bring in my EKGs. I'm going to go File, Open, and I have some ECG art if you can find some of that on the web. But the good news is you can download all these assets right from our website so you can follow along so you don't have to search for it, including the completed program or the completed project. Now, first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of this white background. So to do that, let's go over here to our layer or background and double click on it and just say OK so we unlock it. I'm going to go ahead and grab the magic wand tool and just click on the top and on the bottom. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and so I can select both what's above and below, and now I've got everything, and hit the Delete key. And that's looking good. Now I'm going to show you in this lesson a few different ways to move images between. The first one we're going to do here, since we have both images open down here, I'm going to go ahead and select my blue, and I'm going to bring this image, just select it, and just drag it up here. Now, this will grab the whole image and bring in. So if you had multiple layers, oops, let's try that again. There we go. I clicked too hard on it, so I actually opened it up. So if this had like 4 or 5 layers on it, it would bring all those images over. And sometimes I just want something directly from one layer. Okay, so I want to resize the EKG here. And to do that, we're going to go ahead and transform. So we're going to go ahead and do Image, Transform, Free Transform, or Control T or Command T. And I'm going to make this quite large. I just want one EKG. Now we get a little white here, but that's okay because we're going to kind of really, blur it up here anyway. And the other thing is, normally you don't want to do what I'm doing, making something larger because it's going to degrade the image. But we're going to be adding a Gaussian blur and softening it, so it's not really going to be that visible. To actually kind of get a better look at this, I'm going to hit the Control key plus 0 or Command key plus 0 to kind of show the complete bounding box. So I want to just kind of make this a little larger. And I really just want to do it to the point that the only one EKG is in here. So, and actually just a little bit larger. make sure I have the EKG here. And I may actually just do just a little transform. Maybe just bring this down just a hair. Okay. I can live with that. And now we're also going to inverse this as well. So we're going to go to Filter. And we're going to do Adjustment and Invert. And we're going to do pretty much the same thing we did with the grid. We're going to go ahead and drop the opacity quite a bit. And maybe like 6 or 7%. You want to make sure when we're done with it, we're going to save the Photoshop file so we can always make adjustments to this later on. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to soften up this EKG. I don't want it to be so harsh. So I'm going to go Filter, and I'm going to go to Blur and Gaussian Blur, and maybe just bring this up to around 5. The reason, again, is if I'm going to bring images in, which I plan on doing in my PowerPoints, I don't want these images to compete. So I want it to be nice and soft. And again, you may want to come back and view it. So let's go back to view so we can actually see what we're working on here, fit on screen. And that's not, let's add our header up here so we have a place to put our logo. Okay, now I want to go ahead and bring in our header. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. We'll call this header. And I'm going to go ahead and grab the marquee tool. And come in here and maybe come down about 2 boxes. And I'm going to go ahead and fill this with blue. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the eyedropper and just grab a blue in the center here. And I'm going to fill. I guess I already had it selected. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those marching ants. So we're going to go ahead and deselect. And I'm going to go and grab a tool down here that we haven't used before. It's going to be under the sponge tool. Go down and grab the dodge tool. And actually I'm going to choose highlights. We have a few different choices here. So let's choose highlights. And I got a fairly large size brush. I'm actually going to bring that down. I'm going to use the left bracket. There we go. And I'm going to add an angle. Just kind of come up like that. There we go. So make sure you have highlight because it kind of gives a different look. This one will kind of look at midtones. It'll do something slightly different. And I want it to highlight. So that looks good. And I'm going to do one more actually. Let's just go back to highlight. And maybe make this just a hair bit. And this is only going to affect the layer itself. Okay, that looks good. Now the next step we're going to do is I actually want to bring my logo in because we're going to pull a color from that here. So let's go ahead and bring in our logo. And it should be right in here someplace. There it is. Now there's the logo right there. And I could have just brought it into this image, but I wanted to open it up separately. Now I'm going to show you something here because if you haven't used Elements a lot, by default when you first open it, you really can't, it's kind of tough to drag things. Now here we showed you how we did it. We can just drag this, you know, I can open this up. We can just drag this in here. But let me show you something else. I'm going to go to Edit, Preferences, and I want to go to General. And I want to click on Allow Floating Documents in Full Edit Mode. I actually prefer this. I turned it off just for this tutorial. And what that allows me to do is, if I wanted to, I can take this logo and take it out of the dock. Now what I can do is, I can drag this layer just right over here. And now I can get rid of that. I'm actually going to need that again, but I'll open it up. So I'm going to go Edit this time around. Excuse me, Image, and Free Transform. You have to forgive me from time to time. I use a lot of the hotkeys. Oops. That's not the effect that I was going for. And I use the hotkeys a lot, so I don't always go up to the menu. So I want to hit the Shift key to make sure I constrain this. And I want to make this smaller. And just a hair bit smaller. And that's looking good. In fact, I'm going to actually put this logo over here for this tutorial. I'm going to kind of match up the EKG, the line kind of going through the center of it, kind of with the line there. Now that's looking good. Now, let's call this logo. I'm going to create another layer. And this time I'm going to bring this layer right below the logo. And we're going to call this line. And the reason I brought the logo in first is I want to grab the yellow there and use it. So I'm going to come up here, grab the rectangular marquee tool, and draw a very thin line. Something like this. It doesn't have to be very thick. And now I'm going to fill it Well, first of all, I need to actually select this yellow. And now I'm going to fill this very thin marquee tool with yellow. So I'm going to select, deselect, and I'm just going to bring this down. And that looks good. And there we have it. We're done with this. Oh, let's do one more thing. Let's add a drop shadow. So, and we need to do that up here. And let's go something kind of soft and applies it. That's good. Now we can just save it, File, Save As, and we're going to want to save this as a JPEG file. And I'm going to call this the inside grid. And just do OK. That looks good. Now I'm going to go ahead and save it again, but this time I'm going to give it a title. Put title in its name. So essentially what I'm going to use is, I've already done all the work with the background and stuff in the inside slide, so I'm just going to use the inside slide as my title slide. And we're going to make some adjustments here. So, and now you see why I've got this, all these things labeled here. So what I want to do here is, I'm going to go ahead and grab the header and the line, and I'm going to press down the Shift key so I can select both of them. I'm going to bring it down to about here. And then I'm just going to choose the header and do a free transform. So Image, Transform, Free. And bring that up to about here. And make sure I'm in the center. Hit Enter to apply that. And my line is off, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that too. Just use the arrow key. And I'm going to duplicate this line. And I can do this a few different ways. I can drag it down here to the layer icon. That'll duplicate it. I can do a copy paste, which is probably the longest way to do it. I can do a Control J or Command J. And that just creates a copy of that layer. Or I can just come down here, press and hold down the Alt key. There you go, duplicate it. So that's looking pretty good. Now, the one problem we have with the logo, I'm going to just select the logo here and bring it here. If I try to enlarge this, so we go to Image, Transform, the image is going to get somewhat degraded because I'm trying to make it larger. And that's usually something we don't want to do. So we're going to actually close this. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my logo again, which I closed prematurely. And I'm going to go ahead now and again just drag it over here. And I can get rid of this now. And I'm going to go ahead and transform that. So Image, Transform. And bring that in just about there. That looks good. Now we're going to do a few things here. Let's go ahead and add a drop shadow. And I'm going to do one other thing that I kind of like to do, and this is just kind of an extra bonus. I'm going to create another layer, drag this down below it. We're going to call this Glow. So, and I should just name this Logo. And what I'm going to do with the glow, I'm going to go ahead and select the glow layer. I'm going to press and hold down the Control key or Command key on the Mac. And make sure I'm going to just select the logo. And I've got it selected, get the marching ants. With the glow layer selected, I'm going to go ahead and change the foreground color to white. So go back to default colors, bring white to the foreground, and I'm going to fill that glow layer with white. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those marching ants. And now I'm going to add another filter. And it's going to be yet the Gaussian blur. And I want to just bring that up maybe just a little bit here. It just kind of stands out there. That looks good. And I'm going to change the blending mode. So if I go up here, it's by default, it's set to normal. So I'm going to go ahead and click normal. And now I'm going to use my arrow keys and kind of scroll down to different blending modes. The blending mode simply is taking the layer, in this case, the white, and blending it with the layer behind it. And you can get some really neat effects. But what I'm actually going to go down to is go to Overlay. And this is very subtle, but you can actually see a slight glow there. And one last thing we're going to do before we save this, I'm going to add a drop shadow to my header. So I'm just going to go ahead and just double click on this. And now I've got a drop shadow, and we're done. So let's go File, Save As, and let's save it as a JPEG file, and we'll make it a title slide. And say OK. Let's bring this in PowerPoint. Now the first thing I want to do is go to View, and I want to go to Slide Master. And I want to select the top slide here, the number 1. I'm going to right click on this and go to Format Background. And I'm going to go ahead and use a picture for the background. So I'm going to go File, and of course there's plenty of fun looking textures here. I have no idea why. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and click on File, and I'm going to go ahead and choose the inside slide and do OK. And I'm going to go ahead and close. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now we're going to do a little housekeeping here. I'm going to actually select the title and the body and bring it down a little bit. I want the click to kind of be, just bring it down a little bit. And I'm going to want to right click on this and bring that to the left, justify it. And I'm going to do a few things here with the color. Well, actually, I want to change it to Arial, to my text. This is just my preferences. Click bold, and I want to change the color of the text to match the yellow that's inside the logo. In fact, I'm going to bring over the color picker that we showed you in Photoshop Elements earlier. And here's those RGB colors. Now, you could just write this down, but I'm just bringing this over to demonstrate how I'm going to apply these colors to the text. So let me just put this out of the way here a second. Let's click on my text, and let's say Format Text Effects. Actually, we don't have to do that. We can just click on this and go up here to Text, More Colors, and go to Custom. Now, if you see here, here's the red, green, blue, and here are the colors I'm going to apply. So I'm going to go over here, and it's going to be 214, 214, and 9. My memory span is short. And do OK. So now I've just applied the color in here. So I'm kind of matching, which is kind of nice. It's really subtle, but I like it. And we'll go back to Home here, add a drop shadow. And then here I'm going to go ahead, same thing basically. I'm just going to change the font to an Arial. And I want to change this to white. And then I want to also make sure there's drop shadow there as well. And that's good. Now one thing I didn't kind of mention yet is I told you I put the logo over here for a reason. More than likely my text is not going to be this long, my title. If it does, I'll go ahead and resize it on the individual slide. But if I would have put this over here, because of this particular logo and I want it to stand out in this presentation, if I would have put it here, it would have really conflicted with this, and I would have had done something like this. You know, and I just didn't really want to do that. So that's why I put the logo to the right. I wanted to point that out. Let's go to the title slide. We're going to go ahead and make some adjustments, and this is off, but we're going to make a lot more adjustments to this. I'm going to go ahead and right-click, and we're going to apply a different background. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to choose a different copy. I actually made an adjustment off-screen. The first one we made within Elements was just a little bit too thin. I just made an adjustment here, so this looks a little better. And I'm going to go ahead and close this. And now I'm going to go ahead and make some adjustments. So I'm going to bring this down here. Select it, right-click it. Let's go ahead and center it. And I'm not really worried right at the moment that the text isn't quite lining up with the double lines, because we can always clean that up later on. And let's grab this edit subtitle. And in fact, I can just bring this out just a little bit more to kind of match up with the title above it. And I'm going to bring this up here. And that's looking pretty good. And I'm just going to go ahead and make this white. And that looks good. So let's go up here to Slide Master, close, and see what it looks like. That's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and add our inside slide. So there's our title slide. And here's our inside slide. So very easily we were able to just a few steps in Photoshop, really customize the look of our presentation, give it a look that you really can't do quite a bit in PowerPoint. Now, of course, you can do some of these things, but not all of these things in PowerPoint. So anyway, I hope you really got a lot out of this tutorial, and really you can play with it and really come up with some really unique backgrounds that really are going to suit your needs. Well, until the next time, hope you always find unique ways to make your presentation more editable for your audience. Take care.